Yo, what is good people? Ben from Lover of Tech. Welcome back to another ultimate camera comparison. This time it's between the Oppo Find X3 Lite versus the Samsung Galaxy A52 5G. Pretty much in a budget category between that £300 to £400 category, and pretty much seeing how the camera performs in both video and photo. So as you know, if you've not been here before, we are going to take it through daylight, low light, as many different shooting modes as possible for video and photo, and pretty much see which one gives the best camera experience. Before we do that, let's head into the main camera specs.
So here is a quick specs breakdown for both camera systems on the Oppo Find X3 Lite and the A52 5G. But before we go ahead, a big thank you to Vodafone for supplying both of these handsets for testing and review. There will be links in the description below for all the latest deals that you can find on Vodafone UK for both these handsets. And again, a big thank you to Vodafone UK. When it comes to the camera systems, both are a quad camera system in quotes. And if you look at the Oppo Find X3, you do have the main camera sensor at 64 megapixels. For the wide, then you've got an 8 megapixel ultra wide, and you have a 2 megapixel macro and a 2 megapixel depth sensor. And when you move over to the A52 5G, very similar affair. You do have a 64 megapixel main camera sensor for the wide, a 12 megapixel ultra wide, and a 5 megapixel macro and a 5 megapixel depth sensor. For the selfie, it's 32 megapixels on both, and in the links in the description you have full details of the capabilities of the hardware as well as obviously the video capabilities as well. But without wasting much time, let's get back onto the main camera comparison with the daylight video.
Now we're starting with the selfie video. Oppo Find X3 Lite only shoots up to 1080p 30 frames a second video on the selfie, whereas the A52 5G does shoot up to 4K UHD 30 frames a second. Let's check the image quality, dynamic range, as well as the stabilization. Quick run. Now we've switched to 1080p 30 frames a second, and that's on both cameras. And we're just going to test and see how they both perform all around. And a run. Now we've switched to the main cameras in 4K UHD 30 frames a second. We're just seeing how they perform. One caveat is that you can't go into the ultra wide angle sensor lens on the Oppo Find X3 Lite, but you will see that in the A52 5G you are able to. Quick run. So this will just do a digital crop of ×2 to ×5 in the main camera sensor, as it does not have an optical zoom. And this does do a ×2 crop as well. But you can switch into the ultra wide, and you do have the advanced. Switch into the selfie while you're recording in 4K UHD 30 frames a second. This is such a nice advantage that you do get with Samsung's phones right now, being able to switch between pretty much all the camera sensors and lenses while you're recording. Back to the main. The main brings you back to the ultra wide where you were. Then on the main sensor, then the ×2 digital crop. We are now in 1080p 30 frames a second on the ultra wide on the Oppo Find X3 Lite. Doing 4K UHD on the ultra wide. For some reason it's capped at 1080p 30 on the ultra wide for the Oppo. And we're taking a walk, then a quick run. So this is something just to bear in mind. You do have to pause it, go into the ultra wide to be able to record in the video on the Oppo, or you can do this on the fly with the Samsung, even in 4K UHD 30 frames a second. And now we are in 4K UHD 30 frames a second on both the Oppo Find X3 Lite as well as the A52 5G from Samsung. We're now on the ultra wide on both, and again you have to pause it. So go into the ultra wide, and the ultra wide is limited to 1080p, cannot shoot in 4K, whereas you can shoot in 4K with the A52 5G. Switching to the selfie video at night time, Oppo Find X3 Lite is limited to 1080p 30, whereas you can shoot 4K 30 on the A52 5G.
So this will be my summary breakdown for both the photos and the videos. It's going to be running through so that the video isn't going to be as long as it is. So I'll definitely recommend you to pause it for each summary, for each section, and just have a detailed look for yourself to pretty much see what your thoughts are on a camera comparison for both the pictures in daylight, low light, as well as the video performance as well. Now, when we're starting with the selfie, I do prefer the colors on the selfie for the Oppo. It looks a bit more natural and something that is more realistic, and I like the overall look of it. But in terms of the sharpness, details, and especially the dynamic range, it's way better on the Samsung A52 5G in my personal opinion. In terms of moving to the colors of the rear camera, both do actually do really well. I do slightly prefer the colors on the A52 5G, but that's more subjective to me because the colors on the Oppo are still more than good enough as well. Both portrait modes for the main cameras are great. I ever slightly do prefer the look of the edge detection and blur on the Oppo, so just taking that into consideration, the A52 is good, but I'll probably lean a bit more to the Oppo. With the shots of the flower though, when it comes to the shots of the flower, without macro mode, it looks like the A52 5G can focus ever so slightly closer and create a more natural blur without needing the portrait mode. Same goes for the Oppo as well, but leans slightly better to the A52 5G. But unfortunately though, when it comes to the colors, the shift that you get as well, and it becomes more muted and way softer in details on the Oppo when you use the macro mode compared to the A52. So just bear that in mind when you're using it. In terms of the low light performance, both are nothing special to write home about when it comes to the price point that they're at, but the A52 5G is way better and it holds its own. Even in night mode, the Oppo just doesn't really cut it, apart from slightly on the selfie, but nighttime photos overall, it's a big win for the A52 5G. I would say overall, when it comes to low light photos in the night as well as during the day for daylight photos, I think overall maybe the A52 5G holds better. When we move over to the videos, overall video performance for both selfie and rear cameras, it's a big win for the A52 5G on Samsung. The A52 5G shoots 4K UHD 30 frames a second on the selfie, while the Oppo is limited to 1080p. The Oppo can shoot 4K 30 on the main camera, but it doesn't do that on the ultra wide, which is limited to 1080p 30. And when it comes to video stabilization as well, it's basically non-existent on the Oppo. And at least on the A52, you can get complete stabilization at 1080p for both the selfie and the rear camera. And overall, the 4K video, when it comes to stabilization, just looks naturally more stable anyway. And what's great is you can flip to the selfie and other lenses on the fly when you're recording in 4K and 1080p 30. It just makes the video experience much more flexible on the A52 5G. And I would just definitely say overall, when it comes to the video performance on the A52, it's just in a league of its own when you're comparing it to the Oppo Find X3 Lite. That is it for me. Let me know your thoughts on this ultimate camera comparison between the Oppo Find X3 Lite and the A52 5G from Samsung, and hopefully we'll be seeing more camera comparisons. That is it for me, Ben from Lover of Tech. If you enjoy videos like this, then make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you're part of Team TLS Tech Lover Squad so you don't miss any future videos on the channel. Hope you're all safe during this time. I will catch you in the next one. Peace.